Well, hello, my friends. Welcome back to another episode of Legacy Farmer, the podcast. This is your host, JC Young. And today I'm joined by one of our team members, Andy. You guys have heard him on a couple of podcasts with me already up to this point. And today we're going to be talking about kind of a delicate topic. And it's called bankers and blind trust. So again, it's bankers and blind trust, because what we've learned with bringing more than 300 members into Legacy Farmer is just the amount of trust that our bankers that we work with on a day-to-day, month-to-month, year-to-year basis, just the amount of trust that is just like conditioned into us, right? And we don't know why we have it, but we always like look up and we place like a lot of our bankers on a pedestal. And I'm not just speaking from my experience. Andy's going to talk about his, but I'm speaking from the experience of 300 plus members as well. And there's just a major disconnect in when people first come into Legacy Farmer and their knowledge really around how the banks operate and how much the loan officer that they've trusted for years really knows or doesn't know. So Andy, I'll kind of let you take it from there and talk a little bit about bankers and blind trust and how you were raised and conditioned to think about your banker growing up.
Yeah. So coming from a small town, obviously you have maybe one or two banks that are in your town, right? So growing up on farming operations, you go to town, you get your operating lines of credit, whatever that might be. So most of the time you're working with maybe one or two banks, like in your lifetime on it. Like that's the honest reality there. And what's crazy though, is your exposure to the bank, like whoever your banker is, like that's all you ever know. You're not taught this stuff in school. You're not taught to, with other teachers to teach you about the bank. So pretty much you're going to take the advice that you've been given. Right. And this is the reality for a lot of the members. And one specifically that I had a conversation with last week, just around, trusting everything that the bank says, whether it could be, not being able to negotiate an interest rate, and like two, like figuring out where your overall position is. And just really not thinking and believing everything that your bank says.
Yeah. So essentially, dude, let's go back to like the first loan that you took, right? It was a $500,000 loan. Your parents co-signed on it. You were working with your dad's loan officer, right?
Yep.
Okay. How long had your dad been working with that loan officer before you went in there and signed documents?
So roughly about 15 years.
So 15 years, right? So when you've seen this guy be working with your dad for 15 years, what type of, picture do you have in your mind about this guy and how much he knows?
Yeah, so pretty much everything, right? He's obviously dealt with the operation for 15 years. I'm like, well, this guy knows everything. Like he's obviously either got a degree, like to get this kind of job, like he's got to know it all. Like he's pretty much got to know it.
It's interesting that you use the words degree there, though.
Degree,
right? So do you think
the frame of mind? Degree.
Okay, that is the frame of mind. Like if somebody's in the bank, means they have a finance degree or something. It means they know what they're talking about. And this is somebody that we can safely take business advice from, right?
It's a default mindset, like literally a default mindset. You just kind of trust. It's just a default mindset. You kind of put your hands up in the air.
Interesting. And so let's talk a little bit about your experience though, because you had, when you walked into the bank, did they go over any numbers with you at all? Like, did you really have a business plan, a game plan, talk about leverage, talk about the dangers, the risks, here's what you're going to face, or were you just like blindly walking into it, signing papers and moving on?
So we definitely came up with papers, numbers that we had come up with. But what's crazy is I felt like as we did the paperwork, all of that was kind of like thrown in the wind. These papers were just kind of thrown out the window. All of a sudden now we're talking about, how much of I forget what they considered it, but it was like this score that the bank gave me. This is how much I'm seen as a liability to the bank. I remember talking about that, you're high risk. Obviously you're starting to, to farm, you're taking out this risk, you're high risk to the bank. It seemed to be all about, knowledge that made me feel smaller and didn't feel like I had any control over it.
Okay. But what type of business advice did you get there? Did you get any business advice, or was like, hey, Andy, here's this loan. Good luck.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
It's kind of like here's the money, be sure to go out and make it and pay us back, but no structure in place, maybe a cash flow here, try it, fill this out 1 year, but no long-term game plan. Like what's the big picture here? Okay. It's more, here's what you're looking to buy. Dad can co-sign. Okay, great. We're going to move you on.
Yep. And here's $500,000 to a 19-year-old kid.
Yep.
Okay. So if the banker would have given you business advice though, how much weight would it have carried for you at that age?
I mean, it would have carried some weight for sure.
Mm-hmm.
It would have carried some weight for sure.
Based off of what?
based off of like, this is a true business. Like, this isn't just a hobby.
Well,
dude, this is
but here's the deal. I'm saying why all of a sudden do you carry, that person who's never actually run a business? They're an employee of the bank. They are not a business owner. You're going out and taking $500,000 loan when that person, the biggest loan they have is probably their mortgage on their house for a couple $100,000. And you're trusting them with the business advice that they are giving you, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. Yep. So where's the problem with this? Just that you see.
It sounds so complex, guys, but it's really not. Like, it's trusting somebody who hasn't done just as much as you are. Literally, you take advice from them. You put yourself in a frame of mind that you're going to kind of submit to this process, trust that they know what they're going to do. And literally, you'll go out for the next 15, 20, 30 years, exactly what the bank told you to do.
And you feel like, I feel like too, you walk out of that place and you feel like you have to trust them because you feel like they have their thumb on you right off the bat, right? You're going in there asking them for money. So this is somebody that you should obviously trust, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So here's just kind of what's crazy about this, guys, is, a lot of you guys listen to this podcast, you have your loan officer. Some of you guys have been working with them for 10 or 15 years. Some of you have been working with for 5 years. Some of you have older loan officers. Some of you have younger loan officers. And I'm just going to tell you, these loan officers, when they come out and they're asking you for your balance sheet or your cash flow, which a majority of them aren't even doing that from what we're finding out. But here's like what you need to recognize. A lot of you, like Andy, we were all conditioned to take business advice from the loan officer. Now, here's like what's wrong with this. Okay. Even when I was in the bank, I was a 24-year-old kid. And all of a sudden, because I was a loan officer and it said assistant vice president on my name or vice president on my name, that all of a sudden gave me some authority. I'm going to tell you guys why that's bullshit, because I'm a 24-year-old kid. I have student loans. I don't even own a home at that time. And all of a sudden now I'm qualified to give multi-million-dollar advice to some of these farmers in Western Kansas that have been farming for multiple generations. Like, I'm not even joking with you guys. We had a $6 million customer I took over that loan and brought that loan in. And all of a sudden now I'm qualified to help that person make multi-million-dollar decisions based off of what track record? Like, I didn't earn my stripes until I left the bank and started my own business and had to pay attention to my own cash flow, my own balance sheet, actually truly understand how much all the decisions the banks were making impacted my business. And the thing is, guys, here's like that story. I hope that tells you right there that your banker right now is not qualified in any way to really understand what it is that you're going through or advise you. I was kind of a rare situation, because the reason I even left the bank in the first place is because, my bosses and stuff were like taking these situations lightheartedly. Like, it's not a big deal, Chase, just help them make this decision, or, we're fine loaning that money. It's like, no, you don't understand like the setup, like you're setting these people up for failure because of witnessing my parents and everybody go through bankruptcy and being on the farm when this happened. So I had a different experience with it all. And when I left the bank, it was because of that reason, because people were not taking it as seriously as they needed to. Now, did I know everything that I needed to know when I was in the bank? Absolutely not. Nobody should have been taking business advice from me. And just because somebody's been in the bank for 15 years, guys, time does not equal knowledge. Like, that's just the truth. Time in the bank or time in position or even your degree does not equal knowledge. Doesn't give you any of that. I have a finance degree. And the stuff that we learn in school, it's great theoretically, or it's great in theory, but when it comes to practice and actually putting those skills to the test and actually running a day-to-day business, not reality. Andy, would you agree with that?
Yeah, it doesn't confirm the real life situation at all, if you would agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is what's being taught inside of these agribusiness schools and stuff like this. Guys, the other thing is too, we've had multiple, and this isn't just coming from us, guys. We've talked to multiple members about this stuff. And again, at the end of the day, what we're training all of our members in Legacy Farmer to do is they are learning more about how the bank operates and how the banks make decisions. They are learning more about banking than their actual banker. They're knowing more about that game and that system. And the thing is, guys, is you ask your banker, go ask your banker how the bank makes money. Go ask your banker, like all the regulations and stuff that they have to follow. Go ask your banker when the last time was they looked at the bank's balance sheet or the bank's income statement and actually talked about strategy there on how they're building that business. The only person you guys should be taking business advice from in the bank is the chairman of the board that started the bank, because that's the guy that actually pays attention to how that business is run and where the profit margins come from. I am not taking multi-million-dollar advice from an employee of the bank, plain and simple. But again, Andy, I can't even venture to imagine how many hundreds of millions of dollars in loans our members have combined. And those loans were created from taking advice from somebody who is in no way qualified to be giving any business advice.
Well, how many more bad decisions can you make based off of what you said, what the banker told you? I think that's really the defining line there right there is how many more bad decisions. It might just be 2 bad decisions that will determine like your livelihood, your legacy, everything that you're one day planning to leave behind, which is exactly what you're doing this for.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is too, is how many bad decisions has your banker gotten you into because they all of a sudden were told by their boss, hey, we got this extra funding from the Fed. We're getting it at 10 basis points. Go make some loans with it. We got to do something with it. We can go loan it out at 5 or 6%. So go make a loan to people. Do you think when they're going out and looking for loans, they're at all taking into any consideration whether your business is even in the place right now to where it financially makes sense to make that loan?
It always feels like it's a year decision, 1 to 2 year decision. Like the decisions that you're making, and you talk about this too, there's no small mistakes. There's no small decisions. So yeah, land price or values go up. Let's say market prices go up. You have a bunch of cash that comes in. Okay, great. Now we're going to go out and try to avoid a tax bill. So we're going to make some big buying decisions. And this is at 2012 is a prime example. Guys are making money buying sheds up in my area, putting up sheds, tractors. The problem was though is that they had no problem getting the funding for that year.
Well, and guys, fast forward. He's talking about 2012. Let's look at the opposite. 2021 now. And we're starting to see the same thing happening with our members where loan officers are coming out of the woodwork and they're wanting to make loans because guys are going to make money this year. And you also have the Federal Reserve pumping $11 trillion into the economy over the past 5 years. And all of a sudden the banks are sitting here with cheap money that they can get from the government. And you guys understand, like the bank's not loaning you their money. They're loaning you depositors' money and the federal government's money or the Federal Reserve's money, which is also owned by the federal government. What's funny about the Federal Reserve is it's not federal, nor does it have any reserves. It's a private entity owned by the U.S. government. So that's what people need to understand about that right there. But they are getting cheap money from them, and they want to loan it out to you guys. And the thing is that they are not taking into consideration how this loan, this 20-year loan or 30-year loan, this massive decision that you're making is going to impact you long-term, not even just in the short term. It could have massive implications just in the short term. But to understand, we're making a 20-year decision based off of cheap money and your banker all of a sudden wanting to go out and make loans.
So what you said right there about where the banks get money, how many percentage of people do you think know that?
How many bankers do you think know that?
None.
They have no idea what their cost of funds are, what the cost of capital is, how the actual economy works, how the banks are funded in this economy, how easy it is for the banks to get super cheap money. And then they also don't understand the fact that the banks they're not making the spread on your loans. They're making much, much more than that. Much, much more than that.
So you start doing your research on this, just like I did, right after this. Guys, it's like crazy what comes up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And let's go through an example here right quick. If they're making loans at 6%, just for the person listening to this, if you have a loan that's at 6%, and let's say, times were rough and the banks had to pay deposits, they had to pay 3% on checking accounts. Well, that means the bank's cost of capital is 3%. They're loaning it to you at 6%. So what are they making on that investment? Well, it's 100% return. The reality is though, the way a majority of farmers or ranchers are going to think about today, Andy, is the bank's making 3%. Bank's making a 3% spread. No, their cost of funds are 3%. They're doubling that when they loan it out to you. So what happens then when banks are only paying 15 basis points for their cost of funds and they're still loaning it out at 6%? They're doing a heck of a lot more than doubling that.
That's what's crazy.
That's what's crazy. And that's what people don't think about. They do not understand how much money these banks are making. And guys, what I just shared with you right there, your bankers do not know that. They don't even know the simplest form right there of how the bank's money. The chairman of the board, the start of the bank, guarantee you that guy knows that right there. Otherwise, he wouldn't be in the business in the first place. It is the most lucrative business model in the world while taking the minimum amount of risk possible.
I hope you guys can listen to that. Go back and listen to that. That's no joke. That right there is worth hundreds of thousands of dollars to you. Mm-hmm. By one, interest saved, which you're going to be able to do, but two, just the knowledge that you know and understand how it works. Our small community, 900 people. What do you think the nicest buildings in town are? The banks.
Oh yeah, the banks.
It's not by coincidence either.
I've never walked into a really shitty rundown Farm Credit. where it looks like they were saving money on to actually make good business decisions there. No, it's because they are sitting on massive profits, guys, and they are making so much freaking money off of loaning you money that's not theirs in the first place. It's either depositors, but a majority of it today is the federal government's that they're printing at the Federal Reserve and just handing out to these banks in order for the economy to keep going. Like, you guys don't understand how the money gets into the economy. These community banks have accounts at the Federal Reserve. Federal Reserve prints the money, they deposit it into your community bank's account and give it to you to loan out. Like, this stuff is happening. There's a lot of other different methods they can do to get cheap funding from the government as well. That's just one of them. But once you understand this, to where, you know, the profit that these businesses are making, would you say, Andy, that that's given our members the most courage to actually step in and renegotiate rates once they understand how the banks actually profit and make money?
Yeah, to a T. Just because simply knowing how it's all truly going on the back end. Mm-hmm. I think if you would agree too, like, the biggest problem for us is going in and having that conversation, simply just having the conversation. Because like in you know, just our farm situation, or those who get started inside of your operation, there's gonna be those hard periods where the bank does carry you through, and there's the guilt and shame that comes up. But it is the bigger picture that we have to look at when we're saving guys interest rates dropping at 2%, 1.5%. Like, that's dollars going back into your pocket.
Well, the other thing is too, is like, how small did you feel though when you were walking into the bank? How small did you feel walking into that room?
I felt very small. And I know it's not just me. I know, I'm talking with members, it's not just me. Like, that's
like 99% of farmers and ranchers. How do you get into the 1% that don't feel small, that actually control that room?
You have got to know your numbers.
Okay. And
over and over, but that is it.
And what else?
Know your numbers and know your leverage.
Okay. Know how the bank works. Know how the bank's making money and everything. Like, guys, Andy said 2 critical things: know your numbers, know your leverage position, know what your cash flow is, know exactly how the bank works to make decisions. But Andy also said it earlier: know how the back end of the bank operations work. Yep. Know how their business model works. And once I know how that game is played, I can use that to my advantage on my end. But again, guys, so many of you guys are running in there blindly trusting your loan officer to lead you through making multi-million-dollar decisions without knowing how that game is played and how it's going to impact you long-term.
And that's exactly the conversations that we have week in and week out. That is the core to creating something that's going to be here long-term. Because if you don't trust yourself to make the decision and you leave it up to somebody else, tell me, like, how is that going to work? How is that going to work?
The other situation that I'll bring up here, this is a conversation that came up in one of our chats, and it's no secret that a majority of farmers and ranchers do not like debt because they don't like feeling enslaved to the bank. So one of the members came up and they were looking at, I think they were looking at purchasing some ground. And anyways, they dropped the question inside of our community chat, which, you know, all of our members are in there and active and live. See, it's what's crazy, guys, is you have 300 plus members from all over the country, all sharing information in the simple chat, going through. They have a place to come answer questions. This member was looking at buying some ground, and he was trying to decide between doing a 15-year note or a 30-year note. And a lot of the members responded with, well, if you can just pay it off in 15, do the 15-year note. And here's what's wrong with that scenario, guys. Here is what's absolutely wrong. The way banks make money is it's called velocity of money. Okay. The more times they can turn a dollar, the more profitable they're going to be. And what I mean by that is they do not like to have money locked up in places for a long term. Okay. The reason is because if you do a 30-year loan at 3%, what's the chances that rates are going to go up in the next 30 years, Andy?
Pretty high.
You would think they would have to be, right? Unless the Fed is going to continue printing trillions of dollars for the next 30 years, which they very may well do to suppress rates. But in a true economy, in a free economy, in a free market, interest rates should go up at some point in order to go through the economic cycle that we're due with. So if I'm a bank, there's no way I want to tie up money for 30 years at 3%. Okay. If the person is willing to take a 10-year note or a 5-year note or a 15-year note. Now, the benefit with this situation is we're talking about interest rate risk here. And so with this scenario, I told the member, I said, take the 30-year note, because the difference in interest rates between a 15-year note and a 30-year note are 50 basis points. So half a percent, not very much at all. Right. And I said, if you can make the payment of a 15-year note, then pay off the 30-year note like it's a 15-year note. Just make the 15-year payment on the 30-year note, because what you're doing is you're releasing yourself from taking all this interest rate risk. And what I mean by that is, let's say the member only takes 15 years for that note. Well, let's say he doesn't pay it off in that time, or he has to refinance the ground or whatever. He is taking on additional interest rate risk there. because what if rates increase and now he has to borrow back at a higher rate? He just took that risk away from the bank versus doing a 30-year note. We are giving that risk to the bank. Andy, how many farmers think about this?
None.
Don't even understand
taking the risk away.
So guys, that's like, it's critical that you even understand that. You understand interest rate risk and cost of capital and how all these things work, because it depends or it determines how profitable the bank's going to be and how much money they're going to make. And once you understand all these things, you completely run that room when you're having a conversation with your banker, because they cannot walk toe to toe with you anymore. You know a shit ton more than they do. You have every number. With Farmer Metrics, you have every number laid out that answers any question they could ever have. You know exactly what your leverage position is. You know exactly what your cash flow is. You know exactly how the bank operates and makes money. You also know exactly how much they're going to make on you. You want to know why? Because you can look at exactly what their cost of funds are on their balance sheet. And you can ask them those questions too. And guys, there's 1% of farmers and ranchers that are really successful in this country. They understand exactly how the banks operate and make money.
Here's the thing, guys. Nobody's going to save you. Nobody is going to come to save you. So you have to be the one to make the decision to, one, control the legacy that you're trying to build, and two, do whatever it takes. And this is part of the process. These are the things you need to know to be successful long-term. Otherwise, you will get weeded out. It's not a question anymore.
Go ahead. Sorry.
The way farming has evolved over the years, you got to get on the train or get off of it, or you're going to get hit by it.
You can't just put a crop into the ground or feed a few head cattle and make a profit. You have to understand how all the board or all the pieces on the chessboard are placed and how they move, and really ultimately how you can position yourself on that game to win in the long run. And it's understanding all these different things that me and Andy talked about. If you don't know any of this stuff, I'm sorry, but long term, you're going to really struggle because your lack of knowledge and lack of education around this stuff that's practical. Guys, the stuff we're talking about here, they don't teach you in school. They will not teach you this in ag business school. This comes from reality. This comes from actually playing on the field. Whereas what they're teaching at the school is how to be a fan in the stand. No, this is practice. This is what's going on in the actual game of running a business. And it's not just me and Andy there talking about it. We have proof with 300 plus members, not to mention our members have went back and renegotiated rates this year. And just this year alone, we've saved them $300,000. That's per year, guys. It's over $6 million over the next 20 years, because most of those loans were longer term loans, like a lot of you guys have, which are real estate loans. So you need to understand the implications of this and what can really happen for you once you learn how the game is played.
No, and that's no joke. You'll see in the testimonials, members talking about the savings. It's no joke.
Yep. Pretty freaking crazy. All right, Andy, anything else you want to add before we cut this one off?
Just again, guys, you have to be the one to take control here. It's really putting you guys in a position where you feel like you have control. There is nothing worse than feeling like you are a slave to the bank, feeling like you have no control as a business owner. That is the worst feeling you can have. So guys, consider what could be possible then when you put yourself in a position where you do feel like you do have control. And that's exactly what's happening inside of here. Once you do get the numbers, understand how the bank works, and put you in the driver's seat.
Yep, for sure. All right, my fans. So I hope you found this episode valuable. I hope you take some action from it, because what we were talking about today is literally things that are going to determine your success or lack of success in the future. So Andy, thanks again for joining me, man.
You bet. Thanks, Chase.